Okay, great. This slide kind of details our Syncreate process, which we call play, plan, and produce. So we've broken down the creative process into these three main stages or phases, but with the understanding that it is always an iterative process. So sometimes we play, sometimes we plan, sometimes we produce, sometimes we go back to plan and back to play. So anyone who's, worked on any kind of creative project, whether it's a novel or a musical piece or whatever it might be, there's always refining and revision where we go back and we kind of revisit our original idea and continue to shape it and mold it. So that's what this graphic really tries to convey. And in our experience as creatives and teachers and coaches working with others on creativity, we've noticed a few themes. So number one is many people, as creative as we may be, struggle in some way with the creative process, perhaps in one of these areas. Maybe we have a great creative idea, but we're not really sure how to bring it into the world. Or maybe we're really good at getting things done, but sometimes we have trouble getting started or coming up with the idea, the brainstorming, the thinking outside of the box, as it were. So there are certain barriers to the creative process. And what we're trying to do here is to kind of help you overcome them in some sort of systematic way so that you can get from start to finish on your creative projects, no matter where you may stall out, which many of us often do. So what we've realized over the years is that there are certain questions that most creatives face at some point in the journey. It could be, where do I start? What do I do next? And how do I finish? And so our answers to those questions are, how do I start? And the answer is play. And play has to do with ideation. This is where we engage with possibilities, where we experiment, where we build our skills. And you may have heard the terms convergent and divergent thinking related to creativity. Divergent thinking is where we make associations, where we open up possibilities. This is where we play. So the play phase is a divergent thinking phase. Divergent and convergent thinking kind of map on to what we traditionally think of right brain and left brain thinking, although we know from neuroscience that's a bit of an oversimplification because the two parts of our brains and all parts of our brains are constantly talking to each other. But there is something true about the fact that some of us tend to be more ideational and divergent, and others of us tend to be more, all about the to-do list, getting things done, making it happen. And, a few of us are blessed with both, but that's more rare. So, everyone has a place where they often struggle. So playing is about ideation, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, finding out what's possible. Then plan is where we really kind of get down to the nuts and bolts, where we map out our journey. We create a plan. And we also learn to find our way when we get lost, which is actually going to be the topic of our next meetup in December. We'll tell you more about that later. So in the planning phase, we kind of take our ultimate goal, break it down into certain milestones, and then break it down even further into incremental tasks. We are so devoted to this idea of incremental progress. Sometimes we feel like we have to do the whole thing all at once, but actually, and it's also how we wrote this book over the last several years, we had a working draft leading into the pandemic, and then we literally spent the last year and a half in once or twice weekly conversations on the phone, revising the entire manuscript, like 1 hour, one paragraph at a time. And yet we were able to complete this book. So we're really a testament to this idea of incremental progress. And if we do take, regular, whether it's daily, weekly progress, devoting ourselves to our craft and to our work, then we can begin to reach these milestones. And a little bit later in the webinar, Charlotte is going to walk us through the project timeline template that we've created that can help you kind of create your own map of your creative project and process. And then finally, we have produce. So this is where we refine our ideas, perhaps collaborate with others, as Jennifer was alluding to, and bring our work to completion. And so this is all about, the revision phase, the sharing it with others, getting feedback, making changes, honing, refining, shaping, and then ultimately bringing our work out into the world in whatever form or fashion. We may be creating only for ourselves, for the joy of creating, but there's still some final product, or we might be looking to publish or perform or whatever it might be. And so produce is where we take it to completion. So through this process, and again, it's iterative. So we may start at play, go to plan, go to produce, go back to play, skipping around in the process. And we talk much more about this in the book, that it's not by any means linear or simple, right? It's a very complex process. But what we're trying to do here is kind of identify the major areas in the creative process so that we can recognize them for ourselves to better understand our own creative process and be more effective moving through it. So our goal with this book is that if you sat down and read it, you could get from start to finish on any creative project, whatever medium you're working in, or at least have a guide and ally in that process. So, and this process can work for individuals, people working solo, maybe writing a book, teams in organizations, and people working together in communities. So we define creativity very broadly. Our strong belief is that we are all creative in some form or fashion. We may or may not have a specific creative medium that we work in or that we've devoted a lot of time and study to, but anything can be creative, cooking, gardening. And my mom read this book from start to finish, believe it or not, and she's in the process of moving from New Orleans to Texas, and she said she's planning her whole move around this process. So if my mom can do it, anyone can do it. It's awesome. So that's the process in a nutshell.